Okay, good morning, everybody. Thank you for being here today at our January Critical Area Commission Quarterly Planners meeting. Welcome. The theme for today is development and fee in lieu. We're excited to have three presenters. We have a full schedule. So we're going to start off with, we're excited to have Owen Bailey, Director of Land Use and Policy at the Eastern Shore Land Conservancy. We have Daniel Hamilton, Program Manager at the Chesapeake Bay Trust, and Robin, how do I pronounce your last name? I'm so sorry.
Manakaisen.
Thank you. With us today from the Critical Area Reforestation, and she's the Critical Area Reforestation Planner at Calvert County. And so we're gonna, as I said, the theme for today is development and fee in lieu. We're gonna, again, because we have a packed schedule, normally we go around the room introducing everybody, but we're just gonna dive right on into it, waste no time at all. I'm first gonna welcome Owen Bailey. Owen's going to talk to us about a tool local government can use to better understand the return on investment with each development and redevelopment project. Owen, if you want to take it away.
Certainly. Thank you so much, Katie, and thank you everyone for giving me the chance to speak to you. Before I share my presentation, I want to talk a little bit about my work at Eastern Shore Land Conservancy. We cover 5.5 counties on the Eastern Shore, Dorchester up to Cecil, but not all of Cecil County. And when you think of land conservation, I think most of you might think of easements and protecting property. That's sort of the defensive arm of the Eastern Shore Land Conservancy to protect land. My department is more the offense. So if we're going to be taking land out of development, we also want to help our local governments develop sustainably and in a more thoughtful way and help them find those tools. So I'm really excited to present this latest tool that we have, our Urban 3 data that we acquired over the summer. So I'll go ahead and start sharing my screen. All right, can everyone see? Okay, great. Yeah. We wanted to know, so as a land trust, we understand the value of conservation. For every property we protect, we have to sort of justify the use of funds to protect that property. Either it has to have some type of agricultural value with healthy soils that can, that are very effective in growing food for us. It has to have some kind of habitat value for our native species or some kind of other ecological value. But how do we determine the value of our built environment, of our towns and communities? To date, we don't really have an effective tool, but we're hoping that this kind of data can step in and be that effective tool. So I want to start off by asking the question, what is a city? Well, a city or a town is really just land use. If you think of our towns and counties are incorporated in the eyes of the government, they are businesses, and land use is their business. They sell or lease land to commercial or residential use, and in return, they receive sort of like a rent or property tax revenues, and that allows them to pay for services like water and sewer, first responders, schools, and such. And when we look at the production of land, farmers know exactly what acres are more productive than others. They know if they applied this amount of nutrients and water and seeds, what the yield would be back, how many bushels per acre of corn or soybeans or other products. But our towns don't really have that kind of measurement. We also know that not every piece of land is created equal. Some land is better utilized as buffers, especially in places like in Dorchester County or in Talbot or Queen Anne's County, as the sea levels rise and our fields become flooded, that they become less productive. So we need to be able to track that and measure that in our built environment. So I want to introduce to you this concept called value per acre. If you look at a building, actually I'm going to skip a slide. Today, the way that our local governments look at the built environment and the value, it's sort of like comparing apples to oranges. So if you look here, that Walmart in Asheville, North Carolina, which is the home of Urban 3, it's bringing about $20 million of value in for their local government, while this downtown office building and apartment building is only bringing about $11 million. But that Walmart has to have 34 acres of land in order to bring in that 24 or that $20 million, while that downtown building can bring in that $11 million on a fifth of an acre. So when you divide property tax revenues by acres, that gives you your value per acre analysis. And you can see that that downtown building is far outpacing. It's much more potent and has a higher return on investment for local government than the Walmart does. It's also bringing in more it's also creating more apartment units and places for residents and jobs per acre. Now, like I said, this is not scary math. This is all SStat data. It's property tax revenues divided by acres. And if you think about it, sort of transitioning from what would be a miles per tank analysis on how we view development today and converting to a miles per gallon analysis, which we all know is how we measure cars today and measure their efficiency. And this becomes sort of an economic MRI for our communities. And we hired Urban 3 to look at 8 of the 9 counties on the Eastern Shore. We didn't do Cecil County because of the nature of Cecil County being sort of northern Eastern Shore and North Baltimore. The development patterns in Cecil County are much different from the rest of the Eastern Shore, and we didn't want the average numbers, data to skew the numbers the way that you'll see that Ocean City tends to skew it. So some of these slides will show you the data with Ocean City and the data without Ocean City. But first, let's look at tax systems. Maryland is kind of unique, along with DC, in how we collect local tax revenues. Most of our revenues come from property taxes, while the rest comes from income, and sales tax make up a little bit. But by far, most of the revenue that our local governments receive are from property taxes. And the way that this gets sort of developed, this is looking at Talbot County and Easton. For every dollar of property tax revenues collected, about 49 cents goes to the county, 42 cents goes to the town, and 9 cents goes to the state. So let's dive into the Eastern Shore. Like I said, we covered 8 of the 9 counties on the Eastern Shore. But let's start with that, with the way we look at property tax values now. Here you see in red the most potent properties with sort of the miles per tank analysis. And you can see for some reason 410 Adventures is very profitable. You can see other profitable areas around Talbot County and on Kent Island. But when you switch to the value per acre analysis, you can see that kind of disappears, and those values are not borne out because they're incredibly diluted for the same reason that that Walmart on that first slide is sort of diluted, because it needs so many acres in order to get to that $20 million in value. I'm actually going to skip through some of this. So this is our map for the Eastern Shore, and these spikes are not skyscrapers. This is value. And you can see a very particular pattern, and this pattern has been borne out in other projects that Urban 3 has done throughout the United States and Canada. This value is found mostly in our historic downtowns, in our old mixed-use, walkable, dense developments where you have more units per acre, you have a better or more efficient land use, and you have a higher return on investment in these communities. Let's zero in on Talbot County. Talbot County is pretty unique on the Eastern Shore in that it has 3 spikes, where most of our counties only have 1 spike in the county seat. Talbot County is very lucky to have 3 spikes within Easton, St. Michael's, and Oxford, 3 very productive municipalities. And you can see in between that, the more suburban growth has a much lower return on investment. But as you'll see later on, that lower return on investment has become the more dominant type of development in the last 60 to 70 years. With this data, we're also able to see what is the productivity ratio from our towns to the county. So we see here that Talbot County makes up about 3% of the overall taxable acres of, or Easton makes up 3% of the overall taxable acres of Talbot County, but it brings in 26% of the overall county revenue. So it's a 1 to 10 showing that Easton is incredibly potent, and what's good for Easton is great for Talbot County. I live in Chestertown, which is about 1% of the taxable land of Kent County, but it brings in almost 20% of the overall value of Kent County. So again, what's good in Chestertown is great for the county, which sort of shows that we should be investing in having more productive development in our urban cores and try to limit development outside of them, which, as you can see here, is much less productive. So here are the ratios throughout the rest of the Eastern Shore. Important to note that the reason why Easton has a lower ratio than Chestertown or Princess Anne, it's because it's a very competitive county with St. Michael's and Oxford, where Chestertown is sort of standalone in Kent County, similar to Princess Anne, although you could see some spikes in Crisfield. And poor Snow Hill. Snow Hill is the county seat in Worcester County, but it is overshadowed by the highly productive Ocean City, which is almost off the charts. And as I mentioned earlier, some of these slides, you'll see that we remove Ocean City because, to be honest, you're not going to replicate that kind of development in Ocean City throughout the rest of the Eastern Shore. So let's look at some land use types. So this is a standard box store you can find anywhere USA. Rough on average, they're about $1 million per acre. But if you look at the first example, sort of in the middle on the left, most of that lot is parking lot. About what I would say 30%, maybe 35% is the actual building. And the way we calculate property tax revenues in Maryland, you do have both tax on the land itself and then tax on the building, but we heavily weight the value of what is in the building. That's how our assessments work. So even though this lot is completely developed, you're paying very little property tax on the parking lot. Most of what you're paying is on the building. And if you were to add 11 acres onto this, 11 acres of parking lot, you would dilute your value down to 700,000. As opposed to if you were to remove 11 acres of parking, you would double your value. I think this is a great case for towns that have MS4 permits, requirements to reduce their impervious surface to either convert unused parking lots, underutilized parking lots into natural habitat, stormwater, or to develop into apartment buildings. As we're also in a housing crisis, try to find better ways to use your land use. It's also great for our WIP requirements. Before we started this project, I talked to a couple counties to kind of get an idea of how this data might be helpful, might not be helpful. And in Caroline County, they asked me to be mindful of the fact that knowing that Walmart was going to come up as something that was very underproductive, it's still a vital resource for many people in our community. So we wanted to make sure that we show the different types of Walmarts on the Eastern Shore and the different types of value. So here you can see that the Walmart in Easton is almost $300,000 more productive than the Walmart in Salisbury. And it's because the Walmart in Easton shares a parking lot with Giant Food and other buildings. And it's a smaller parking lot than the Walmart in Salisbury. So we think this data is not only helpful to encourage development of our historic cores and make more walkable mixed-use development, but also finding ways to make our big box stores slightly more productive, knowing that they provide such a critical need and resources for our communities. But on average, Walmart's about $700,000 per acre throughout the Eastern Shore. And we're going to use that number as we go through the rest of the slides as sort of like a baseline. So let's look at residential. Here we have a couple different densities throughout the Eastern Shore. The one in the upper left corner is actually right down the street from my house, and it's one of the largest setbacks I've ever seen. That's got to be 60 plus feet, and it shows that you are diluting your value by requiring such huge setbacks in your communities. Because even though people might love this quaint little house and sort of the rural aspect of it, this house is still fed by water and sewer, stormwater, roads, and uh, you're not getting enough value to pay for the ongoing maintenance of that infrastructure, as opposed to the more modest home in the middle, or the much more potent, the $3.6 million per acre home on the far lower corner. But on average, single family detached homes, which make up a huge percentage of our housing supply on the Eastern Shore and throughout the rest of the state of Maryland, it's only bringing in about $200 million per acre. And if we go up to single family attached, we can see huge jumps in that number. $1.2 million in Delmar, $2.9 million in Denton, and $3.4 million in Fruitland, for an average of $1.9 million per acre for Eastern Shore, 1.6 if you remove Ocean City, and keep that average of $200,000 per acre for the single family detached that we have. So this is almost 10 times more productive in having this kind of housing supply. Here we go to the missing middle, and you can see these numbers really begin to jump. 1.8 million in Easton, $5 million in Easton, $7 million in Ocean City. Missing middle housing, 3 stories plus, is $2.7 million per acre, 1.9 when you count out Ocean City. So this is sort of a interesting slide to look at. When you look at apartment buildings, you would think, oh, this is pretty high density, but why are these properties not more productive? And it's because, yes, they are fairly dense, but you're still diluting your value by having these huge parking lots, by having these huge lawn spaces. And again, you are paying property taxes on the not developed part of this, but it's a much lower percentage, and it's diluting your value. The Sheraton in Easton, $16 million per acre. The parking lot for that building is underneath of it. So this is a highly potent and one of the more one of the highest productive residential units in the Eastern Shore. But this does pull down the average per acre analysis for the Eastern Shore, because most of these kinds of developments have huge parking lots. Let's look at commercial. It's not just Walmart, it's all big box stores. Target, Lowe's, Home Depot, still fitting in with that $100,000 per acre. The center shopping mall in Salisbury, less than $500,000 per acre. And you'll see here my hometown in Chestertown, Kent Plaza in Washington Square, about $500,000 per acre. Building up slightly to the Denton Plaza and the outlets in Ocean City at just over $1 million per acre. But on average, this kind of development is the same as Walmart, just about $800,000 per acre. Now, when you go downtown to mixed-use commercial, you see those numbers creep back up again. This is the density question answer. $2.1 million in Cambridge, $6.2 million in Stevensville. That Stevensville property is one of the highest productive properties on Kent Island. $6.7 million in Chestertown. Almost $3 million on average throughout the Eastern Shore. And when you can stack your uses, when you have commercial on the first floor and multiple stories of residential, that's when you really get that high potency, that huge return on investment. $9.7 million in Salisbury, $12.6 million in Easton, $5.4 million per acre throughout the Eastern Shore, again, compared to that Walmart, which is $700,000 per acre. And here's when the numbers really begin to skyrocket. $9 million in Salisbury, $12.3 million in Easton. And the most productive property on the Eastern Shore is the Monte Carlo in Ocean City at $51.8 million per acre. And in second place, the Ross apartment building in downtown Salisbury. When I met with Salisbury officials, I learned that this building was financed through some means that required to have a tax abatement, meaning that this building does not pay property taxes for, I think it's 10 years after construction was completed. But in the long run, this building is going to help pay for the it's going to contribute heavily to the budget in Salisbury. And I'm happy to report that Salisbury just recently approved doubling the downtown density in its urban core to allow more buildings like this that have high productivity and create a lot of housing that is really needed in our state. So here's sort of a cross section of development types on the Eastern Shore. You see low density, medium density, and high density. It's important to note here that our zoning on the Eastern Shore, whether it's municipal or county zoning, really only allow the low or medium types of housing, really just the low types of development. So our zoning is really tying our hands behind our back as far as helping our communities become more productive. And at a time when we're in a housing crisis, we're in a transportation crisis, climate crisis, budget crisis, it's important to point to our zoning as one of the culprits for why we're not able to build places that are more sustainable and productive. I'm going to skip through some of this just for the sake of time. I want to be able to get to some questions. So here is sort of our all-star lineup for the Eastern Shore. These are the most productive buildings in each of our communities. There's that $6 million per acre I mentioned on Kent Island and Stevensville. But in Chestertown, your downtown historic district, $23 million per acre. In Centerville, it's 14. Easton, $18 million. Snow Hill, 4 million, or 9 million, Princess Anne, $4 million. So I think one thing we hope that this data can one way it can help our local governments is by showing them that these historic places, which in many of these towns, they have historic district commissions designed to protect the value and integrity of these. The zoning does not allow for the replication of this kind of development. So we're asking our local governments, look at what you value most in your communities. What is your community character? What is your highest return on investment? And think about how you can adjust your zoning just to allow for that next increment of development so that you can replicate this kind of development pattern elsewhere in your community so it's not illegal the way it currently is. And I put my hometown of Chestertown in that category. I used to be on our historic district commission, and I was so frustrated many of our meetings when I would see these beautiful properties that were being restored, knowing that in my neighborhood, which is R2, 3 units per acre, that if I wanted to, I could not tear down my home and replicate this value that we have in our town. So let's look at land use. So approximately $1.9 million 1 million acres on the Eastern Shore. 1.6 million of them are agricultural. 160,000 acres are single-family detached, and then the rest of it is very small. But let's look at some of the built environment. So single-family detached brings in approximately $37 billion in value, commercial $7 billion, agriculture $4 billion. I feel it's important here as a land trust to mention, yes, even though agriculture is the predominant land use on the Eastern Shore and it's only bringing in $4 billion in revenue, agriculture doesn't require water and sewer. It doesn't require a lot of first responders. It doesn't require a lot of seats in our schools. It does not require a lot of investment. It is also very productive in our natural resources economy, which is estimated to be about $8 billion on the Delmarva Peninsula. So it is productive in other ways, not just in property taxes. So let's look at single-family detached and single-family attached. So single-family attached, as we've seen, is much more productive, but it only makes up 0.04% of the units of the land use on the Eastern Shore compared to single-family detached. And you need a lot more land to get to the kind of value that you have with single-family attached. Again, it's because our zoning does not allow for that kind of density. And here we can see the property value per acre by land use. Country clubs, very little value, same as industrial, single family detached. But single family attached is one of the more productive land use types. So when we talk about density, it doesn't have to be downtown Baltimore or Annapolis. It can be more single-family attached homes, modest-sized homes on the outskirts of our downtown, so that people can live near our downtown cores and be able to walk and bike to get to the basic services that they require. So switching gears with the time we have left, we asked Urban3 to also look at a historical analysis of Eastern Shore, understanding that the Chesapeake Bay Bridge has really contributed to the development pattern since the first span was completed in 1952 and the second span in 1971. So on the left, you see pre-Bay Bridge development. Throughout 250 years of European settlements, we had developed 10,000 acres at roughly $557,000 per acre. Since 1952, we've developed an additional 163,000 acres of land at less than half that value. And the reason why this is extremely significant is we've developed an additional 163,000 acres of land that all has water and sewer, stormwater, but we've developed it with less value, so that our local governments are now struggling to find the revenues needed to replace our aging water and sewer line pipes, to fix our roads. And since we had the snow a couple weeks ago, I'm seeing so many of our roads are just destroyed by snow plows, and that's all going to create, all going to require funds to replace and to maintain. But we just don't have the value in our communities to keep up with that demand. And we have to look for subsidies from the state and federal government at a time when we're also needing to help address our housing crisis or climate crisis. So here are the productivity ratios. It's, like I said, less than half the value of what it used to be, with so many more miles of infrastructure needed to be maintained. We also asked Urban3 to look at a sea level rise analysis, knowing that the Eastern Shore is, I think, the third most vulnerable region in the United States, behind New Orleans and South Florida. What is going to be the impact of sea level rise as these properties become inundated and their values are lost, and thus their property tax revenues are diminished? So we asked Urban3 to look at an average of about 3 feet of sea level rise throughout the Eastern Shore. And this is what we found. At 1 foot of sea level rise, you're losing approximately 130,000 acres of land at $0.1 billion in value, and about 1% of our miles of roads. At 2 feet, that increases to about $500 million. And then at 3 feet, it jumps to $2 billion of property tax values lost. So this is lost revenues for our towns and counties at a time when they're going to need that funding to help with climate mitigation. And then when we factor in storm surge, that becomes almost catastrophic for our communities, especially Dorchester and Somerset County. And this plays in, actually, I'm going to skip over this because I want to make sure we have time for Q&A. This is looking at St. Michael's and the loss of productivity. I'll make sure that this slide deck is available for anybody who wants to dive into some of these numbers later on. But we know that the loss of land in our communities is going to require climate migration. So where are these people going to migrate to? Well, the data shows they're going to want to migrate to inland and to places like Easton and Caroline County. So let's think about the ability of these towns and communities to grow, to accommodate that kind of climate migration, and to make sure that as we're developing the value needed to keep pace with demand of infrastructure. So as people move in further inland, Easton thankfully is built on sort of a hill, so they are fairly well protected compared to other communities like Cambridge, Ken Island, or even downtown Chestertown. If we put in an extra 5,000 people, let me get there. This is the slide I wanted to show you. These are our choices that we can make. We can continue to build single-family detached homes and consume more acres at less value, or we could switch development types to a more historical development and develop the same amount of units on less land with more value. Again, this is just more data showing that we have some tough choices, but thankfully we have data to look at that. So what is the loss per county? Well, Somerset and Dorchester County are going to be hurt the most, losing approximately or respectively 82,000 acres and 187,000 acres, $581 million in value, $751 million in value. And what does that mean for our towns? Graysonville and Chestertown are going to be hurt the most. Chestertown, because it's a historic port town, most of our highest return on investment properties are within the flood zone of the Chester River. So these are communities that need to start preparing for the loss of those productive places and do the triage. What can we protect? What can we move? And what do we need to just abandon and try to replicate that value elsewhere in our community? So looking at the development patterns, we can either continue to go down the road that we've been, or we can look at our historical development types and think about how can we be more thoughtful in the future and set up future generations with better land use types. Let me get to the last slide here. So in the future, we can develop the way we have and get $38 billion more in property values on 160,000 acres. That's if we were to continue our current trends with low density. Or we could go back to historical development and we could achieve that same amount of value, that $38 billion in value on 20,000 acres, which would also save us a lot of future funds dedicated to infrastructure costs. So we can either have a crab cake with filler, or we could have the good stuff. So now what? Concentrated development is more productive, more efficient. We think that this data is pretty conclusive of that. Look at pre-1952 developments for inspiration. Think about how can we develop pattern books that show we value these kinds of properties and we want to see these kinds of developments in our future, to help developers come in and understand what our communities are looking at, so that we can also streamline planning practices in our communities. Development patterns matter. Allow that kind of high potency just to be developed by right in our communities, knowing that it's going to have a huge return on investment for our local governments. And we need to use our land wisely, because we have a storm coming and we're going to need to prepare for it. So thank you for your time. Stop sharing so I can see everyone.
Thank you, Owen. That was an amazing presentation. Very, very interesting, and very honestly, when you put in the sea level rise, it made me think about like just not only thinking about how we can, like, where would be better to kind of invest areas, but to support those areas that are bringing in so much revenue.
Yes.
I do. So now's the time we're going to be opening up for questions. If anybody has any questions, feel free to raise your hand or unmute. I have one question to kick us off. And this might be kind of beyond the scope of the tool, or this might be beyond the scope of what you're looking at. But I am wondering, since you guys were considering sea level rise, and the focus is really on trying to kind of protect and put more investment into the areas that are bringing in more kind of more income, more revenue. Have you guys thought about how this could impact communities that are like underserved and overburdened at all?
Yes. Yeah, that's something that we knew going into this, looking at other projects that Urban 3 has conducted throughout the US. A lot of our communities, some of the underserved neighborhoods are much more productive than some of the more wealthier neighborhoods. Think about your neighborhoods that have those McMansions. Yeah, those McMansions are bringing in a lot of property tax revenues, but again, they require a lot of acreage and they receive a lot of services. And most of the time, those services are sort of subsidized. They're not bringing in enough property tax revenues to pay for the services they're receiving. Meanwhile, a lot of lower income neighborhoods, which are more dense, think about your neighborhoods that have a lot of townhomes in underserved communities, they are not receiving enough in sidewalk repairs, street trees, uh, other maintenance, snow plowing, uh, just because they're seen as sort of blight. Uh, One of the reasons why zoning as a practice was started in the United States was because of reaction to what was seen as sort of a blight on our cities, which were apartment buildings. Apartment buildings are highly productive just because of the density. If you don't include with that huge parking lots, but it's sort of a tool that we've removed from our tool bags, and we need to understand this data, which is in GIS form, so you can click on each parcel and see what is this productivity. You can see where your value is, and it encourages local governments to invest in those areas that are more valuable, to plant street trees, to repair your sidewalks, to put in bike paths to make them better connected to other parts of our community so that they're not sort of segmented and cut off and forced to live in a car dominant society.
It makes me wonder what it would look like comparing, like using the model and overlaying it with I think it's MDE's EJ Screen tool
Yes.
over in underserved communities. I think that'd be very interesting, especially since like it could even support the model even further of like, hey, these are the areas that you want to encourage growth and development because they're also underserved, but they can bring in more if we invest a little bit more into them. So I think that's really amazing. What did you have a link to the tool that you can share with folks in the chat, or I can also share it out with like in the in our.
I'll share it. It's in a Google Drive because the file is so large. So I'll share that with you afterwards if you can share with everyone else. So there's both this full presentation, which also goes in the full set. It breaks down by county and county seat, so you can have that data. And then there's also a project summary. There are the GIS shape files which will be available. We're working with Urban3 to make sure that the metadata is included with it, just for future references, to make sure that that's accompanied with it.
Wonderful, thank you. Any other question? Any questions for Owen? No questions. A silly question. Cassie, go ahead.
Hey, so I'm Cassie Dyson. I'm the environmental planner with Dorchester County. I was just wondering if this is a presentation you'd be interested in maybe sharing with the county, where you've kind of started discussing some of the climate issues and how sea level rise is going to impact a lot of our southern residents. And some of the information in here sounds like what we've kind of been searching for, but it sounds like Urban3 maybe has already done the legwork.
Happy to. Yeah, we want to make this data available to anyone who wants it. So yeah, happy to have that conversation.
Perfect. Yeah. So we can connect offline at a different time, but I think this would be really great for the county.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Charlotte, go ahead.
Thank you so much, Owen, for presenting. I think this is like the second or third time I've seen this presentation, and I pick up on like a little bit more each time. So
I do the same. I do the same.
But I was actually messaging with Nick and Lisa and Jen during the presentation because it occurred to me that this almost, I guess, like in thinking about this from like a planning perspective, like seems like this data lends itself to more like form-based codes rather than focusing on like uses in specific zones and that kind of thing. Like, have you all thought about that at all, or flesh that out at all?
Yes, and that's something we want to. It there's no one size fits all. So we first want our communities to recognize where's your value and what is your zoning allowing. I'm on the planning commission in Chestertown, and we have a development in our R4 zoning. So it's our highest density of residential. So it allows 4 stories of apartments, but our R4 also allows everything under that. So the developer here, they want to build single family detached homes, and our zoning allows that. But we want this data to help influence zoning updates, because most of our communities, they are okay at updating their comprehensive plans, but they're not good at going back and updating their zoning to reflect the values in their comprehensive plans. So we hope that this data can influence the updates in your zoning, whether it's a comprehensive update to your zoning, whether it's putting in form-based code in certain neighborhoods where you want to focus on development or concentrated development, or developing a pattern book. Again, we've been in Chestnut, we've been negotiating with a developer to try and get more density, but they came into this project with an idea and a product that they wanted to get to market, and we didn't have the form-based code or the pattern book to help them through the project, which also makes your overall end product more expensive. Because when you have this drawn out planning process, it adds time and money, and that time and money is added to the final product. So when you buy that house for $500,000, you're also paying for all the work that was done by the developer in the town to get that house to market. So yes, encourage our local governments to think about, where does form-based code make sense? Where do pattern books make sense? And for places like Cheshire and Easton, you already have a great historic district. You have historic district guidelines. That guideline is sort of halfway to being a pattern book. You know, these are your properties that you value, and you should want more of them. Yes, they may not make sense in every part of your town. That's why maybe form-based code is better for certain sections than others, as you want to grow internally outwards. You know, you don't want to have high density on the outside of your town, because then you have all that density that has to then get downtown or to your shopping center. So you're creating these transit corridors of huge traffic. So, you know, but we want this to be sort of the beginning of that conversation. So thank you for that question.
Eric, go ahead.
Oh, good morning. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Eric.
I had one question. Now I have 2 based on what you just said. I'll just lay them both out there, and hopefully it won't require an essay response. So the first one is, I'm wondering if you all looked at any of the more traditional single family home neighborhoods, because I think one thing you said about people wanting choices is very important in this conversation. And I just harken back to when I was a planner in local government. We could never get a number like 9 units per acre past our citizens. But the truth was that 9 units per acre was the single family detached density of our historic neighborhoods. And when you said, well, would you like more of this? The answer was almost always yes. So I'm curious about the economics of those old historic single family detached neighborhoods. Like, are we truly, is that inherently a loser from an economic perspective, or are there, you know, some single family detached patterns that could at least break even? So that's one question. And then the other question is just your storm surge numbers. That's the first time I've seen those in terms of calculation of loss. I'm curious what level of surge you all modeled.
I believe the surge was at 10 feet, because we did ask them to model 0 to 10 feet, but we wanted to focus on that 3 foot, knowing that that's more realistic number of what we're facing now and into the immediate future. So then that storm surge is looking at, well, at 10 feet, I think this also, I think we asked them to put that in, having seen what had happened in North Carolina this past hurricane season. So we thought, okay, yeah, maybe that 10 feet of sea level rise is not really relevant now, but that storm surge is certainly is relevant.
Right.
I lived through, what was it, Hurricane, it's one of the I's, back in like 2003. Isabel, yeah, that came at high tide, and that southern wind just pushed all that water up the bay and just destroyed so much value downtown. So that's for that question. For the other for single family detached, it is really hard to acquire density. I know because we live in a car dependent society, so we have to account for the movement and storage of our personal vehicles. And it's really hard knowing so we sort of coupled the most expensive, least efficient type of transportation system with the most expensive, least efficient type of housing. And that is where we are right now, looking at those two combined. And it's hard to separate them. I mean, humans require, I guess, sort of two things. Where do you live and how do you get to your resources? And it's those two go hand in hand. So I'm a huge fan of the group Strong Towns. If anybody doesn't know Strong Towns, look them up. They are a fantastic advocacy group started by Chuck Marone, who is an engineer and a planner. And their whole philosophy is incremental development. You don't have to jump into huge densities. If you're having trouble getting to a higher density, yeah, look at some of the single family detached designs that are more productive than others. So not requiring large setbacks, not requiring large easements on either side, so you can have just slightly more density. And for your communities that already have them, just allow for that next increment of development, allowing a single unit to become a duplex or a triplex, by allowing ADUs to be built in backyards, or for communities that have large garages, allow for those garages to be converted into apartments. That'd be great for teachers or young people who want to stay in your communities, and they would just overall increase the productivity or the value of that home. It's really like it took us 60, 70 years to get into this mess, and it's going to take us 60, 70 years to get out of it. But we can make decisions now that are incremental, that can slightly increase our productivity in our already built environment. And for our new development, in Chestertown, we are looking at a townhome development, and we're requiring that in this one lot, knowing that townhome, and I think it's 5 units, so it's 5 townhomes and then a break, and then 5 townhomes and a break. We know that that's much more productive than having just 2 or 3 single family detached. So it's not perfect, but it's just incrementally better.
Thanks, Owen. I appreciate it.
Certainly. I'll also tell one quick story. So, like I said, I'm on the Planning Commission in Chestertown, and we want to start using GIS to help inform our comprehensive plan update. And we've been working with the Eastern Shore Regional GIS Cooperative from Salisbury University. It has a circuit rider program, and they will work with local governments free of charge to develop GIS maps based on whatever your needs are. So we wanted them to include a GIS map that had our zoning, election districts, even trash pickup schedules, and critical area. And I noticed in this one neighborhood that has very low density, it's 2 units per acre. And I've always wondered, why is the density so low? I realized it's in the critical area. It's LDA, so limited development. So that density is handed down from the state. Yes, the town could use growth allocation to increase it to IDA, but it makes me wonder, should we have LDA on water and sewer? Wouldn't it be better to either develop it intensely or not develop it at all? This is also next to Chester River, so it's in the path of sea level rise. And in the future, should we either try and get more housing out of it, or should we say, no, we're not going to allow any kind of development, and we're going to use this property in the future to help protect the more productive properties that are behind it, so that we can still get some value from it. But it just makes me think, it's a good idea to have LDA on water and sewer. And looking at this data, for me, the answer is no.
That's a really good observation. Actually made me think about how, because I remember a few months ago we were looking at like a particular growth allocation. I believe it was going to be converted to LDA, and we were thinking about how it'd be important, making sure it was on water and sewer.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that opens up a whole. I mean, what you're talking about opens up a whole other can of worms that we really haven't thought about, which is like, here are our 3 different designations, and like if you are, you know, in the LDA or RCA, like you said, you could use growth allocations, you know, to make the LDA IDA, but should we be investing it there? Or, you know, if you're going from RCA to LDA, you know, do you even want to have require water and sewer there?
Yeah.
Like I believe we do in some others. So it's a really good thought-provoking question conundrum that we, I don't think really.
I think it's a question that's going to create a lot more headache.
Yes.
and I understand none of this is easy. It's, you know, we're in a tough situation, but at least we have some data to help us think through these challenges.
Yeah. That's important.
Not every solution or answer is going to be perfect. You know, we're probably going to take a couple steps forward, a couple steps back, but I think more data, the better.
Yes, agreed. Any other questions for Owen? Okay. Owen, thank you so much for presenting today. It was really, really great to hear more about Urban 3, and looking forward to having a copy of your some of the JS layers that you used.
Yeah.
And that'll be, so following up, we'll have that in the email that follows this presentation, or that follows our meeting today.
Thank you.
So thank you so much for being here. Really appreciate it.
Well, thank you for the time.
So now moving from talking about development and where we best to invest development, we're going to switch gears a little bit to talk about fee in lieu. So we know that in you know, different situations, you have development and you need to, like when you're developing or when you're clearing in the buffer, the critical area, depending on where you are, LDA, RCA, IDA, you have, if you can't mitigate, that you can do a fee in lieu of mitigation. And so we have, we're excited to have Danielle here from Chesapeake Bay Trust to talk to us a bit more about some opportunities that folks can use to spend their fee in lieu. Because we know that a couple of jurisdictions have come to us talking about how they're not quite sure, you know, they have all this money, you know, piling up, and what can they do with it. So with that, Danielle, I'm going to hand it off to you. Thanks for being here today.
Great, thank you. Let me share my screen. All right, can we see the PowerPoint okay?
Yes.
Great, thank you. Great, so today I'm gonna, as Katie mentioned, I'm gonna talk a little bit about opportunities at the Chesapeake Bay Trust. Let me see. There we go. So I'll tell you a little bit about the Chesapeake Bay Trust. I'll talk about how we are currently managing some fee in lieu funds from some of our partner organizations, the different grant programs that we offer as ways to administer fee in lieu funds, and then I'll share some sample projects so you can get a sense of the types of restoration and community projects that are happening on the ground throughout the watershed because of these fee in lieu funds. And then we'll of course have time for questions at the end as well. So the Chesapeake Bay Trust, we're primarily a grant-making organization. We were founded more than 30 years ago by the Maryland General Assembly. So we're a quasi-state agency, and we administer over $10 million in grant funding each year to hundreds of different nonprofits and community organizations throughout the Chesapeake Bay watershed. And our mission is to engage and empower diverse groups to take actions that enrich our natural resources and the communities of the Chesapeake Bay region. We receive funding from a variety of different sources. So this is a quick overview. One of the primary sources of our unrestricted funds is from the Maryland's Chesapeake Bay license plate. There's also tax checkoff and hunting, fishing, and licenses and voter registrations that direct some funding to the trust for projects in Maryland. But in addition to that, we receive a variety of individual and private contributions, as well as partnerships and grants from state, federal, state, and corporate agencies. And all of this funding that we receive goes into the community for these main purposes of providing education, doing direct restoration work, involvement and engagement of our community, developing science and innovation, furthering science and innovation, and building the capacity of other organizations working, broadly on environmental and restoration causes. My PowerPoint's just like lagging a little bit here. Okay. So we operate a variety of different grant programs, and the full list is available on our website, but they fall into these main kind of buckets. One being our environmental education and workforce development programs. We run Maryland's Climate and Conservation Corps for young adults. And then the next bucket, community engagement and capacity building work, focusing on kind of the human side of restoration, of increasing folks' knowledge, engagement, and behavior change related to environmental causes. Our direct restoration and science work, we do environmental justice and urban trees programming, and then we operate some county-specific programs, which is the bulk of what I'll talk about today, because some of those counties are the ones that are partnering with us to administer their fee in lieu funds that they've accumulated. Sorry, the slides are not advancing. Sorry, I don't know why it's not going to the next slide here.
If it's the bandwidth being stubborn, you can also turn off your video. I don't know if that would help, or if it's just the screen being stuck.
Yeah, sorry about that. Give me 1 second.
Okay, no worries.
I'll reshare. Turn off my video. Okay, let's try this again. Okay. So there we go. Okay. So sorry about that. So the trust administers fee in lieu funding in a variety of different ways, which is mainly what I'm here to talk about today. So we partner with different counties to administer their fee in lieu funds. And one of the benefits of working with the trust to administer these funds, we have, set grant programs, set protocols in place to identify, vet, and manage high quality restoration projects that span, currently our fee in lieu funds are awarded for things such as tree plantings, wetland creation, stormwater management, habitat enhancements, and more. We have a wide network of organizations that we outreach to and who are, familiar and have worked with the trust. And we also put a lot of effort into identifying new organizations each year in our grant programs. So we reach a really diverse pool of applicants to bring in different diverse partners and a variety of different types of restoration sites. Currently, the fee in lieu funds that we're managing are going out throughout the state of Maryland, and I'm going to share a little bit about the different grant programs that we use as vehicles to administer those funds. But overall, this is a way to ensure that the fee in lieu funds are going towards positive community and environmental impacts. And when we administer these funds, we can provide a level of customization with each of our funding partners in terms of what geography they want to focus on for funding projects, the project types, and the applicant type. So we can kind of customize who we recruit to submit applications, and in the way that we do outreach to get projects that meet the goals of our funding partners. And that includes a focus that we have at the Trust in a lot of our programs on reaching and identifying projects that are serving historically underserved communities. So the first grant program that I'm going to talk about is the Outreach and Restoration Grant Program. This grant program is a collaborative funding model, and we work currently with 12 different funding partners. But starting in 2021, one of those partners, or it's a three-party agreement between MDOT MPA and the Critical Area Commission. And they entered into an agreement with the Trust where the Critical Area Commission is agreeing to accept MPA's payment of their mitigation funds to the Trust to satisfy the mitigation requirements resulting from their development activities in the critical area. Overall, the Outreach and Restoration Grant Program can award projects that are up to $125,000. The amount of funds that we receive through our partnership with MPA and the Critical Area Commission, the fee in lieu funds that we receive in this grant program varies between the fiscal years depending on what type of development projects are occurring and what fees are incurred. And we provide the flexibility to change the funding amounts year to year. And this grant program combines those fee in lieu funds with other unrestricted money from the Trust, as well as some of our other funding partners' funds to really like expand what we're able to achieve, even if the fee in lieu amount is a smaller amount in any given fiscal year. This grant program funds 4 different types of projects, including outreach and knowledge building, behavior change, restoration, and then a combination of restoration, which is used as a tool for doing outreach and building the knowledge of the community. So those are the main types of projects that can be funded through this grant. But as I mentioned before, we can customize based on types of projects. So for the funds, for the fee in lieu funds from the Critical Area Commission and MPA, we can specifically outreach and target those funds towards the restoration projects that those partners are most interested in. So an example of a project that was funded with fee in lieu funds through the Outreach and Restoration Project took place at the Evangelical Lutheran Church of the Prince of Peace. There's some pictures, they're a little small, hard to see, but they took a large area of their parking lot space and converted it to a rain garden. So this was mutually beneficial in a bunch of ways. They're reducing the sediment load into the watershed. That they also were experiencing a lot of flooding issues because all of the runoff from their parking lot was headed straight towards their building. So it was directly addressing the community's need of their flooding issues. It also added a beautification to the property. The finished rain garden has this nice bridge that goes over it, and they installed lovely signage that is also used to educate the congregation, and held a series of events to educate their congregation around creation care and caring for the environment as a value of their church. And that's one example of the types of work that can be funded through outreach and restoration. The next grant program that we offer with fee in lieu funds is our non-tidal wetlands grant program. This is a partnership with Maryland Department of the Environment. And these funds are generated from mitigation funds that come from when there's non-tidal wetland losses. This program also includes funds from civil or criminal penalties that require fees to be paid. So It is a large program. Funding can go up to $950,000 per project or contract, and the overall goal is to design, construct, monitor, and protect non-tidal wetland sites and their buffers throughout the state of Maryland. So an example, oh, sorry, not an example. This is our priority watershed map. It's a little bit old now, but just to highlight this is where we prioritize projects for this particular non-tidal wetlands grant program. And these are experiencing the most or expected to experience the most wetland loss due to development. So those are our priority areas. So some examples of non-tidal wetlands projects that have been funded through these fees and administered by the trust. We have the Beltsville Agricultural Research Center did a 12-acre restoration of non-tidal wetlands. And another example here. The Longwoods non-tidal wetland. This was the creation of a non-tidal wetland over 13 acres, and it was in the design phase. So we fund the design phase and the implementation phase, as well as monitoring and maintenance. The next grant program is a partnership with Anne Arundel County, the county government. So Anne Arundel County administers reforestation and afforestation requirements of the Critical Area Program, as well as the Maryland Forest Conservation Act. And a primary component of this is coordinating reforestation and afforestation projects throughout the community. So this grant, it's our Anne Arundel County Forestry and Forest Land Protection Grant Program, makes the connection between qualified nonprofits that plant and ensure the protection of trees on properties throughout the county. So our goal is to do reforestation and afforestation projects, specifically focusing on areas that are in riparian buffers or large continuous tracts of forest, or those that have a particular habitat importance. So an example of a project funded in Anne Arundel County through this fee and lieu program, or fee and lieu funded program, was from the Alliance of the Chesapeake Bay that reforested a little over 27 acres at Sandy Point State Park. They also did a lot of invasive removal and control. And then, sorry. The final program that I'm going to talk about is one in Charles County. It's another forestry program. So again, the Forest Conservation Fee and Lieu Fund at Charles County is the source of this funding, and they've partnered with the trust to administer it into reforestation projects that increase tree canopy as the primary goal. Currently, the funding available is up to about $20,000 per project. So this is also an example of a smaller scale grant program that still is achieving the goals of reforestation and tree planting and serving the purpose of using the mitigation funds in this way. So an example from this program, the Nature Conservancy did a reforestation project at the Nanjemoy Creek Preserve. A couple pictures there. So another example, this one I highlighted, is small funding amount, but still able to make an impact. So the scale of projects that we're able to fund with fee and lieu funds is also like very wide, and so we can manage like counties that have just small pots of money each year. We can still find really impactful projects to use those mitigation funds, all the way up to like the wetlands, which is almost $1 million of an award. And I think that was my last example. So I wanted to save time if there were any questions. Thank you all.
Danielle, thank you so much. This was great. I have a quick question. Would you be willing to share? Well, first, would you be willing to share this presentation with us so we can give to everybody who was able to come today or not come today?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm happy to
Awesome.
share the presentation. It has my contact information at the end too. So if
Okay.
anyone wants to follow up afterwards, I'm happy to.
And oh, Jen's got a question. Go ahead, Jen.
Last of a question. I just want to make a plug for Chesapeake Bay Trust. We do partner with them specifically for a 3-party MOU that was created with Maryland Port Administration. So any impacts in the critical area, the funds can get transferred to Chesapeake Bay Trust. And they are just a really great partner, and they do great work of helping to secure the funds for water quality and habitat projects. And for those jurisdictions that might be limited in staff or capabilities of getting really good projects in the ground, CPT is a great partner. So that's all I had.
Thank you for that.
Danielle, I have a quick question because we're a little tight on time.
Yeah.
But just one quick question before we jump to Robin, and then if other folks have questions, either of you can chime in now or just we can follow up. They can follow up with you after the presentation. So if any of the jurisdictions are interested in partnering with the Chesapeake Bay Trust, is there a particular time of year that you guys accept partnerships or get the conversations going, or is it kind of all year round? They just reach out to you or reach out to the trust if they're interested.
Yeah, thank you for that. Any time of year. So we're always bringing on new partners. Each of our grant programs kind of runs on a different annual cycle. So if you're interested in having us administer the funds, we would love to talk at any time. We can either kind of bring you in as another funding partner on an existing grant program, or talk about running like a separate grant program for your jurisdiction. So those are 2 options. They provide different levels of flexibility and structure, and be happy to talk to anyone at any time.
Wonderful. Thank you, Danielle, so much. We are
Thank
short
you.
on time, so I want to jump over, make sure we have enough time for Robin. Danielle, thank you so much again for being here today and presenting. Again, we'll follow up with more information after the meeting if you guys have any other questions for Danielle or even for Owen. Robin, thanks for being here today. We're going to jump over to you. You're the last wonderful presenter today for a quarterly planners meeting. Still keeping on the theme of fee in lieu, Robin's going to share Calvert County's fee in lieu program as some more inspiration for what folks can do with their fee in lieu funds. So go ahead.
Good morning, everybody. Can you see my screen?
Yes, you're good to go.
Okay, good. Thank you for the opportunity to share this program with everyone. It is a real popular program in the county, and it allows us to meet our program mission of maintaining 100% of reforestation in the critical area, and to meet the other goals, habitat and protection, and increasing the diversity of native plants. We do only plant woody vegetation, trees, native and native shrubs. And then the other goals, improve water quality. And I use the program also as an outreach tool to educate property owners on the value of good bay stewardship. And I'm going to go through this overview real quickly and then get to some examples at the end of some of the projects that we've used the money for, the fee in lieu money for. It was developed in response to the provision in COMAR to maintain and increase the forested vegetation of the critical area. And essentially, it's also known as the Free Tree and Shrub Program in Calvert's critical area. And if folks have area on their property that they'd like to replant and it meets the requirements, they're eligible to apply, and by preparing an application and planting plan, which can be done online on our website. Again, the fees are generated from permit mitigation fees. They're fees that are paid when there's not adequate space on a property to meet the mitigation requirements from the impacts of the project. And this is important. The fees in lieu are held in a special revenue fund. This fund is only used for this program for planting the trees and shrubs in critical area. And that's crucial to the program's success because those funds, it's budgeted every year, monitored, and then we have the contract budgeted out to, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later on. I do have an oversight committee, and it's called CARE, Critical Area Reforestation Evaluation, and they approve every planting, they approve the budget, and I meet with them 2 times a year, one in early January next week, to review the prior planting from the fall and to go over, the successes and some of the pitfalls. It's always interesting because you never know what's going to happen when you're working with 59 property owners in the county to plant native trees and shrubs on their property. This is the makeup of the committee. As you can see, it's a broad swath between agricultural, natural resources, local businesses, and then our University of Maryland Extension office here. There is a formal bid process that luckily we were approved for the first time in 2021 to do a multi-year bid, and that's really important because it frees up a lot of my time. It allows us to build a relationship with a good landscape contractor. You'll see here that it says that it's a conservation landscaping project. We renamed it a while back from reforestation to conservation landscaping because we are focusing primarily on changing all of these huge lawns into native plants, and that's one of my primary goals, as well as combined with the critical area goals. They kind of overlap, but this was really a big step for us. It allowed us to focus on we have to go with the lowest competent responsive bidder. And we were getting a lot of lawn mow and blow folks, and nothing against, there is a niche for that, but I wanted contractors that were experienced in planting native plants so they can talk to the property owners about the native plants, the benefits of native plants, and also sourcing the native plant material, the trees and shrubs, having good relationships with those growers and nurseries. It makes a huge difference in the success of each year's planting. And it allows me to also build a relationship with the contractor over a period of years, and which also the quality of the project has really improved because of this. We're coming up on the 5th year in 2025. This is just a little bit about, it was a little difficult at the beginning to figure out how we were going to do a standard multi-year project, and how we ended up doing it was we didn't want to get into all the details on labor cost and all the regulations that go along with that. So the contractor takes each native plant and it implements his cost for sourcing, for installation, and anything else associated with the project for each line item. And here, I think the next slide will explain this a little bit better. Let's just see, that's the application right here. This is pretty much what he bids on, or he bid on initially, and that bid amount stays the same for each species of native plants in Calvert County. He will have a price over here for per plant, and the quantity, and that is based on purchasing the plant, sourcing the plant, transportation, installation, labor costs, everything's built into that line item of the species. And so that gave us a standardization that we were able to work with over each year for each contract. Okay, let's move on. The applicants, there are a lot of repeat applicants because there are quite a few large areas on private property that people want to get, want to convert into native plants and get rid of their lawns. And this just goes over the process so they know what to expect. And this is what's required, an application. And we have the Excel file online, and they can put their order request in, and then they have to provide a planting plan. And this is what the application looks like. It's just pretty straightforward. It does go over here at the bottom. It says that the reforestation program can't be used to meet any mitigation requirements, and you have to have an application and a planting plan to be considered. And we don't do the town of Chesapeake Beach or North Beach because they have their own critical area program. And then the property owner signs the application, and they agree to maintain their planting for 10 years. We do not have an easement. We do not record the plantings legally. This has worked real well for us because unless there's a change of ownership between my monitoring and the property owner's buy-in to the planting and the critical area law, we have had pretty good success with most of these plantings surviving. This is what the planting plan looks like. It's not exactly what I always get, but this is what applicants strive for when they're submitting their application. At the beginning, there's a lot of my time on conducting site visits with new applicants, sometimes older applicants too, that may be repeats. Will need a site visit depending on what the scope of their project is. And I look at the soils and I ensure that they're putting the right plant in the right place to the best of my ability. And this is real important too. I talk to them about future maintenance and monitoring because I only have so much time, and the onus of this success goes over the long term goes to the property owner. And it's important that they have the ability to water, the physical ability to maintain these plants, and to contact me if there are any issues that arise. I also, in addition to the planting plan, some of the properties are second homes. So I provide flags for pickup, and they can mark the plants on the flags, and they can put them out like if they're going to be away for vacation, or if they're just not here in the fall, when the planting usually occurs in November. And with second homes, they may be in sunny Florida or wherever they go for the winter. Okay, and here's some examples of the projects. This is a project that was, you can see they have a revetment in, but they were having some erosion on their bank. And so these trees were installed first, and then the following years, they've been trying to increase their understory with native vegetation. And this has been a real successful project. And I didn't get an application this year, I don't think there's a whole lot of space left on their property to plant anymore. So I would say this was a success for sure. Also, this is a larger property and we've done several plantings here. They wanted to extend their forest. So you can see where the plantings have been put in, and this is also designated as forest interior dwelling bird habitat. So even better, expanding the value of this property for that. This is a buffer planting. And again, this is over several years. This property owner has requested trees and canopy trees and also understory trees and shrubs. When I first started this program, shrubs were not on the approved list, and so it took me a couple years to get the committee to approve shrubs. But we have Calvert County has tidal waters on both sides of it. It's like a boot, and for those of you that may not know, and so we, with the increased storm effects and sea level rise and climate change, a lot of the cliffs are experiencing accelerated erosion rates, and planting across the top of that slope on properties has allowed for some stormwater management benefits from this program. And we found more and more that shrubs are the only thing that can, you don't want to plant big trees on the edge of an eroding property on a cliff. So shrubs are being used more for those types of properties. And again, an understory planting. This property had some trees that came down during a storm, and they wanted to try to stabilize the area with some plantings of understory trees and shrubs. And again, this was a community that had a 100-foot buffer that it has been very wooded, and this particular property lost a large percent of their wooded buffer, and so they used the program to replant trees, canopy, understory, and shrubs. And I'm sorry, I don't have this was planted like 4 years ago. I don't have a current picture of this, but I will have to make sure I get one, because I think that would be the full picture for this. This is a marina where they were, because of the road coming into the marina, and the strip of land was just grass, and they want to try to mitigate some of the runoff from the road by a planting. So they planted these shrubs through the program, and hopefully they'll come back and plant some more, because I think that was a good use for the program. This was an older community that had, over the years, had lots of ivy and other types of invasive plants, mostly English ivy, but there were some other invasives that were like grapevine that were wrapped around. You can see this tree in the far part of the picture has been affected by a big grapevine that was wrapped around it. Well, they as a community, they got volunteers and they got rid of their invasive plants, and then they used the program to replant with native trees and shrubs. This is a retirement community located in the southern part of the county. Stormwater management, they had huge issues with standing water between their buildings, and so they've been using the program over the years to try to plant around some of the more some of the areas that receive more standing water than others. And this is just a planting that was done, a mixture again of canopy, understory and shrubs. This was the planning we did this year. It was a real success. This is the breakdown, and we used the critical area, Kumar, we use the credits that are available to total up what we've planted. So this is where this square foot number of area planted came from, was from using, the 200 square foot value for canopy tree and down to even breaking out the large and small shrubs. And then we take that and compare it to the planting contract cost to come up with our cost per square feet and per square foot. And last year for 2024, it was $2.03. This year it's $2.20. We base our fee in lieu rate on that, and we can't change it, of course, every year. But we do try to keep it as close to that contract cost as possible. Okay, I tried to go through that very quickly. That was my last slide. And just to give you an example of the program, and to summarize, you need a targeted fund for your fees in lieu. That's important. A multi-year contract with a contractor that knows, that's knowledgeable in native plants and works well with property owners is a real benefit to the success of the program. We do have these plantings done on GIS. We've used interns in the past to track the plant, to enter the plantings, and it allowed us to be able to search and query on the data. We haven't had an intern for a couple of years, so we're not quite up to date with capturing all these plantings, but hope to be soon. Let's see. Our goal is we don't have to advertise because it is such a popular program. But if we didn't have the private property owners that were invested in the program, we haven't been very successful in convincing farmers to use the program. We're hoping we have them on my oversight committee for this project. We talk about that every meeting, and we're always looking for more land to plant. We do meet our 100% no net loss forest goal, and that's certainly important, and it is tracked with a huge spreadsheet. I think some people, Charlotte and Nick, have seen that spreadsheet by visiting our county in the past. But bottom line is it is successful. It meets a lot of different areas as far as or meets a lot of different goals: stormwater management and critical area, and also just for the aesthetic pleasure of having a nice planting. Buffer is a priority, and it's been great. I've worked here for 22 years, and it's great to go out and visit the sites and see that this program is making a difference. And I'll be glad to take any questions. I know we are really close. I'm 4 minutes over, but this slideshow is available through Critical Area Commission, and they'll make it available. And if my contact information is at the beginning, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. I'll be glad to talk to you about it. Thank you.
Robin, thank you so much. Honestly, this was really great to see. Honestly, Calvert's reforestation program, and I actually do remember that when I know we're over time. If folks need to sign out, feel free. We are recording this, so if you're missing anything, this recording will be available. I have a really quick question. You were talking about how you kind of spread the information about this. I know when I was on a site visit with you, you put in a word to the applicant like, hey, this is, what we were talking about, impacts on the site and potential mitigation. You put a word in for the reforestation program. Is that your primary way of kind of reaching the audiences, is by during during site visits with
Well,
lots that are looking to develop, or are there other ways that the county reaches out?
That's certainly an effective way, and I meet with you all. I meet with contractors also on properties. I do bond inspections for the bonds when there is a place to plant. You're required. That's your first priority is to plant if there's a available space, and so I do bond inspections. I also meet with HOAs for permitting and really, yeah, that's probably my primary way. But word of mouth, because this program is popular with residents, word of mouth really has been effective also. We talked about advertising, but that's a cost we don't have to do right now. We'll see what happens in the future. And we're already getting application period is from January to the end of April. And I've already got a couple applications that have been submitted. And I'm sure we're gonna try not to do as many sites this year because it was a real stretch trying to get it was a real stretch for me trying to get out and do all the site visits. And therefore, we're going to try to limit the number of sites this year a little bit. And that will allow we need to update the website. And there are just a few little tweaks that need to be made to the program. And that'll give me some time to do that also.
Wonderful. Well, Raman, thank you so much for being here today. And thank you again, and Danielle for presenting as well. We're at the end, we're over time today, so I'm just going to wrap up. But thank you all so much for attending the quarterly planners meeting, our January quarterly planners meeting. This recording will be available, and if you have any questions for our presenters, we'll follow up with those presentations as well as contact information. So if you didn't get your question today answered, you can do that following the meeting. Just a couple of really quick things. Our next meeting is going to be in person, so be on the lookout for some information on that. I believe it's going to be in April. I don't think we have Kate Durant on right now, but we have some updates on our enforcement regulations. And so in our, the person who was going to talk about it isn't here today.
I'm here.
Oh, Kate!
The internet's really crappy today.
Kate, would you like to put in your plug for the enforcement?
Yeah, just to give an update, we are working on drafting enforcement regs to help give all of you guys in the local jurisdictions a little bit of assistance with your own enforcement programs. So I'm currently working on that. I'm hoping that I'll actually have something at the next quarterly planners meeting to share with all of you. But right now I've really just started. So it will be based on what's already in the law, but we'll hopefully be able to give you guys a little bit more teeth. I know some of the jurisdictions really struggle with being able to actually enforce their programs. So that's our goal for you guys.
Thank you, Kate. All right, and I think that's everything. So thank you all again for attending a quarterly planners meeting. More information to follow in our in the email following our presentation today. So thank you so much and have a wonderful rest of your day. Take care.
Thanks, Katie.